Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natinator, and welcome to another Creepypasta narration. This story is another one written by Keith Myers, author of The Perfect Daughter. And once again, I really like this story. It's titled, She Waited. Now as always, turn out the lights, get comfortable, and let the story begin. Rhonda Hubert never seemed to mind being referred to as the crazy woman who lived near the woods. In fact, she reveled in its implication. She never had to worry about the neighborhood children skulking around her home trying to catch a glimpse of the notorious evil witch who cast spells on naughty little boys and girls and feasted on their bones when they died. The little shits were too terrified to even walk past her house for fear of their souls being ravished. The outlandish tales that swirled throughout the town about Rhonda and her eccentricities were based solely on ignorance and idiocy, but they were entertaining nonetheless. At a mere 5'5" and barely weighing 100 pounds, Rhonda marveled at her ability to incite such dread and panic. Even as a child, people seemed to cringe whenever she walked into the room. Whenever she spoke, her words always brought about frantic whispers and icy stares. Raised solely by her mother, Laura, who was also known for her unusual idiosyncrasies, Rhonda was reared to believe she did possess certain gifts and abilities that set her apart from others. Her mother taught her to bask in the hatred felt by those who didn't understand her beliefs and to take solace in their fear. Rhonda would watch in awe as her mother was subjected to vile comments and hurtful insults, and instead of retaliating, she would merely respond with a smirk and a wink. But strange occurrences would follow. When Pastor Jenkins' wife spat in Laura's face and called her the devil's whore, she flashed a quick smile and whispered something into the aging woman's ear. To this day, no one knows what was said, but later that evening, the pastor discovered his wife lying face down in a puddle of blood. She had bitten off her own tongue. A few days later, she was declared insane and spent the remainder of her years in the psychiatric ward. Pastor Jenkins forbade Laura and her daughter to step foot in his church and condemned them to a life of torment and misery, which Laura always found amusing. So much for forgiveness, she would scoff. On Rhonda's 18th birthday, her mother disappeared. After preparing breakfast and giving her daughter a kiss on the cheek, she walked out of her home, never to return. There were those who claimed to have seen her walking towards the woods, while others swore they saw her hitch a ride with some unsavory character and vanish down the road. Whatever happened, there was a sense of relief when she departed. It was as if the entire town could breathe again. No one ever questioned her disappearance or dared to talk amongst themselves about her whereabouts or what became of her. Many believed the shadow of evil would, again, befall the town by just the mere mention of her name. So, she was forgotten, buried away like a dirty little secret no one wanted to divulge. To everyone's amazement and dismay, Rhonda seemed almost cavalier about her mother's desertion. There was a lack of emotion. No tears, no panic, no concern. She would stroll through the town as if she hadn't a care in the world, greeting everyone with a smile. Some viewed this as unadulterated disrespect, and soon the whispers began. behind closed doors, when the lights were dim, the children asleep, and the moon illuminated the night sky. Hushed voices would stir the pot of gossip and hearsay, and before long, a disturbing question dripped off the tongues of many. Had Rhonda done something sinister to her mother? Images of carnage and death clouded the minds of several townspeople who suffered from an overzealous imagination. Stories of devil-worshipping, witchcraft, human sacrifices, etc., spun through the grapevine like a spider's web. Soon, Rhonda became a pariah, another outcast to shun and fear. But unlike her mother, she began to slowly erase herself from the town. She loathed these people who, to her, were nothing more than a bunch of close-minded hicks. Their existence was an annoyance to her world, which consisted of deliberate retribution for past wrongs. Her mother's burden would become Rhonda's victory. She had been schooled well, and understood why she had been left alone at such an early age to fend for herself. Survival was a necessity, which couldn't be compromised. "The vultures are beginning to swarm," her mother would warn. "If they smell fear, they will attack, and there will be nothing left but blood and bones." Rhonda always knew she would be the one to attack first if need be, so she patiently waited. 20 years to the day her mother disappeared, an agonizing scream came from Rhonda's home, piercing through the tranquility of the evening. Terror seized hold of the residents like a vice. No one wanted to speculate who or what could have made such a horrifying sound, but its implication echoed throughout the entire town. The following day, pandemonium ensued when it was discovered one of the locals was missing. Taylor Ramson, the sheriff's 18-year-old son, had a penchant for meddling into affairs which didn't concern him or could place him in a very awkward situation. As a child, he had heard the many stories about Rhonda and her wicked ways, and was warned time and time again to keep his distance from the woman branded as evil. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but discovering the truth resurrected it. So Taylor, brimming from head to toe with the characteristic teenage swagger and defiance, planned to venture out towards the woods after school. He was taken aback when she invited him in. He had been looming outside her home, skulking in the darkness like some amateurish peeping Tom, hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous enchantress. When the front door slowly opened, Taylor had to fight the urge to flee. Rhonda stood in the doorway with a faint smirk on her lips. The speck of light streaming from inside cast a shadow above her head, giving the impression of a dark halo. Her eyes were piercing and seemed to cast a spell on the young man. Taylor found himself completely captivated as well as aroused. Gone were the gruesome images he had created in his psyche from years of heeding to horror stories told by his overly protective father. The delicate vision that stood in front of him was neither threatening nor hostile. Rhonda held out her hand. "Be my guest for the evening," she purred. Somewhat hesitant, but intrigued, Taylor smiled and allowed himself to be led into the house. Hours later, his scream echoed through the woods. Sheriff Ramson, with his deputy by his side, banged on Rhonda's front door with such ferocity his knuckles bled. The night air was peppered with threats and obscenities. Suddenly, A high-pitched, almost manic laughter came from inside the house. Overcome with frustration and rage, Ramson charged through the door like a raging bull. The laughter abruptly stopped. The house was silent. As the men anxiously scanned their surroundings, the sound of footsteps caused them to draw their weapons. They stood stock still as the steps grew closer. To their surprise and delight, Taylor appeared from around the corner. His father let out a sigh of relief and embraced his son. When questioned about Rhonda and the events that took place the night before, Taylor was evasive, almost secretive. As they drove away, minutes later, he looked back at the house and let out a low chuckle. Later that same night, Sheriff Ramson was restless and couldn't sleep. Not wanting to disturb his wife, he quietly tiptoed out of the bedroom. As soon as he entered the hallway, he noticed the light coming from his son's room. He thought Taylor had gone to bed hours ago. He could see movement from under the door and hear the sound of muffled voices. Without bothering to knock, Ramson entered the room. He found his son, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring directly at him. "I know what you did," he said accusingly. "What are you talking about, son?" Taylor let out a low and menacing laugh, which caused the sheriff to quiver in fear. "She showed me, Dad," Taylor explained. "You were the one to be feared, not her." Ramson couldn't speak. His body was drenched with sweat. "You were the vulture waiting to feed on the bones." Ramson closed his eyes as his son regurgitated word for word the events which occurred over 20 years ago. Images of Laura Hubert's pain-stricken face as he began striking her over and over again with the butt of his gun played through his mind like a warped movie screen. His lips curled into a slight grin as he remembered burying her body in the woods and knowing her disappearance would never be questioned or investigated. "Was it the baby that made you do it?" The question jolted Ramson back into the land of the living. "What?" Taylor was now standing in front of him with one hand behind his back. "Or knowing you were cheating on Mom. Taylor, or maybe you didn't want anyone to know you were fucking a witch." Ramson slapped him. With a demonic chuckle, Taylor revealed, "She knew what you had done, and she waited patiently all these years." "Waited for what?" "To take from you what you took from her." Suddenly, Taylor's hand, which was holding a butcher knife, darted from behind his back, and he forcefully dug the blade deep into his throat, hitting the jugular. Blood erupted from the wound like carbonation from a soda can. Ramson, still in shock, let out an agonizing scream as he watched his son fall to the floor. As he bent down and held the dying boy in his arms, his deafening wailings ripped through the town. Now, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but several people swear on the graves of their loved ones that they had seen Rhonda outside the sheriff's home softly singing, "Happy Birthday," and she was walking hand in hand with the ghost of her mother.